Hello, welcome to 2021. We're reviewing our first film of 2021, which is a very 2020 film. We're reviewing the film Lockdown. It's directed by Doug Liman, written by Stephen Knight. Stars are Chiwetel Ejiofor and Anne Hathaway, and Sonic, who is in fact a hedgehog, and the first thing you see in this movie. But yeah, this movie was completely made during the pandemic from start to finish. It was 100% during the pandemic / closures from like March to still now in America here. Overall, I feel like we all felt similarly to it, but overall, not that great. So Daniel, what are you thinking here, buddy? And I'm here with my friends Daniel, Jack, and I'm just Tyler, and here we are.
Here we are, just three buddies talking about a movie that none of us liked. I think one of the things, just overall, my thoughts on the movie are that it's a big letdown. I don't usually watch movies that I don't like. I find it to be a waste of time. A lot of filmmakers will tell you, watch bad movies because it helps you understand what makes good movies. It like helps you understand how things go wrong. And I think that's fine advice. But there's a difference between watching like The Room and watching Lockdown, whereas The Room is like comically bad and then you can take from that what you want. But Lockdown, I took almost nothing away from it because it's more or less just boring. It's very uninteresting, and I'm not interested in completely dogging this movie because it seems like it was made with good intent and they tried their best given the circumstances, and all the pieces involved with it, as we'll talk about, are super talented people. Stephen Knight and Doug Liman and Chiwetel Ejiofor and Anne Hathaway, and even some of the side characters in the movie. Ben Kingsley is in this movie, and it's like, wait, is that Ben Kingsley? Oh, it is. It's Ben Kingsley. Look at that. So overall, I just think that the movie is kind of uninteresting. I think there's a lot of miscalculations along the way. It's 2 hours long, and it has no business being 2 hours long.
No.
We'll get into more detail as we go along, but those are just my immediate thoughts.
Yeah. Jack, what about you, buddy?
Oh, I feel quite similar to this. Some people may know, I typically don't watch films, and it's because of ones like this where I spend 2 hours and then feel like I wasted 2 hours of my life. Look, props to them. They tried very hard. They were attempting to pull off something that is not easy to do right now, which is to make a film in quarantine. Truly one of the more boring movies I have seen in recent memory. I did not enjoy it. I honestly felt like I wasted 2 hours of my life, but props to them for trying. You know, everyone's got to try.
Yeah, and I don't think anything is distractingly bad in it. A lot of it's actually pretty decent, and I think it gets pretty close in a lot of ways. I'm looking at the Imdb rating, and not that this matters at all, but sometimes they hit it on the nail. And this one is exactly a 5 out of 10, and I think that really describes this movie.
Perfect. That's like perfect.
Good job.
Right down the middle of the line. But again, including Stephen Knight's writing, like there are a lot of interesting like lines that are like, oh, if you just like explored that a little more, like it'd be interesting. But it's a double-edged sword because I think if you release this 6 months from now, a year from now, you know, like you go into production like maybe 6 months or a year from now and then release it like even further down the line, it's not interesting at all. Like I think this is a perfect time to release a movie like this because we're still technically in lockdown in a lot of ways. But it's just like they didn't have enough time to polish the script and stuff. And I think I give it more props than it deserves. But I definitely think it's just kind of incredible that they made this during COVID. But I didn't love it, and I didn't really like it.
It wasn't like egregiously bad. It wasn't some awful thing. It was truly just nothing for me. Yeah, like it was just there.
Daniel, do you have anything on after initial thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, so what I did was I wrote down a bunch of the problems that I had in the movie and then stuff that could have been really good and then stuff that was actually good. I guess I'll do the good stuff now, just because like we started off pretty
Yeah.
negative, because the movie is generally not terrific, and I think we'll break down some of the reasons why it's not so good. But stuff that worked for me, the first thing that I have in my notes is Ben Stiller. Ben Stiller makes every movie better. Ben Stiller's a really good actor, and I love him in parts like this. The bit with his son like writing stuff behind him, and then when he drops the AirPod, and then he turns around and he's like, oh shit. That made me laugh. And I think that also speaks to one of my problems with the movie, which is it's marketed as like a comedy heist movie. And it's really neither. It's not very funny, and it's not very heisty. But whenever Ben Stiller and Ben Kingsley show up, it's at least enjoyable, because their presence is very fun and it's very jovial. So that's one thing that I enjoyed, was actually those two particularly.
Yeah, kind of off that, I really enjoyed that aspect of it a bit, with like, again, huge actors like Ben Stiller, Ben Kingsley, like Mindy Kaling, and they play like really just small bit parts, and they don't really add too much to the story, but it's kind of just refreshing to see like these, again, huge Hollywood stars just doing something like little, just real fast. It's like Mindy Kaling probably shot her stuff in a day, like on Zoom with like Doug Liman, and that was it. Kind of cool.
Yeah, and I think, for the most part, the Zoom stuff feels like a distraction from the movie, as opposed to like, instead of these characters being integral to the story, it feels sort of like we have to get out of this room, like this house and this room, for 40 of the 2 hours, like 40 minutes of the 2 hours. So like, let's just put Ben Stiller on a phone and like do a funny bit. Let's put Ben Kingsley on and let's make him love Jesus and like not quite know how to frame himself.
Yeah, and not know who Edgar Allan Poe is.
Right.
I thought that was like, I think that concept's really funny, but I feel like everyone knows who Edgar Allan Poe is. It didn't land completely.
That's something
for me,
that's in my stuff that could have been better category, because Chiwetel Ejiofor's character is like a poet at heart. And I think that they didn't explore that as well as they could have, but they got some of it pretty good. The Edgar Allan Poe bit speaks to why this movie isn't a hit for me. It's like that's a comedy bit inside of a non-comedy movie, and they don't play it as a comedy bit. That's so obvious that everyone would know who Edgar Allan Poe is, and he is a poet, so he would be so mad that people don't know who he is. So that should have been a reoccurring bit throughout the movie. Like, everyone knows who Edgar Allan Poe is, and then every time, 3 times throughout the movie, or 5 times throughout the movie,
or 7 times throughout
the movie, every time someone doesn't know who Edgar Allan Poe is, that's an opportunity for the Chiwetel character to be like, "Are you kidding me? No one knows anything about art these days," and that could have been like a funny bit.
And even like starting that early on, like again, maybe they did, and I wasn't paying attention. But like maybe you have him like reading on Zoom or something, like The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe, and like everyone thinks it's like an original piece by him or something like that. And it's like, are you kidding me? This is like literally the biggest thing Edgar Allan Poe has ever done. And like you could build it out like that, but it is just really like thrown in there, and then he gets upset at Edgar Allan Poe. Like if it was like weaved throughout more, it might have worked. But
it was a bit that was close to working, but did not quite hit the mark.
Needed a bit of a workshop.
Little tiny workshop.
Sums up a lot of this movie.
That definitely is sort of the microcosm of the movie.
Yeah, totally.
I have one more thing that goes into my like really good part of the movie category. That's the scene where they're in the actual store, and they go into the deli section, and they're just picking up food that they want. It's very satisfying and therapeutic when you watch a scene from The Walking Dead, or you watch a movie that's set in like post-apocalyptic future. It's always the best part of the movie when characters go through a shopping mall, or they go through a store, and they just pick up all the things that they would want to pick up. And they get in there, and Anne Hathaway is just like, take whatever you want. And he picks up a bag of chips, and she's like, dream a little bit bigger, which always reminds me of the Tom Hardy line in Inception, where he's like, you mustn't be afraid to dream a little bigger, darling. And that's so much fun. Big bazooka energy. That's always fun. I think that scene is when the movie's kind of humming, because it's like, oh, this is something that is we're actually using something about COVID to benefit the movie. Like, this is something that only happens because of COVID, whereas the majority of the rest of the movie could have existed outside or inside of COVID.
I think that kind of leads into my biggest complaint for myself personally about this film. If we want to go into that, I know we're kind of talking about good things, and I think Chiwetel Ejiofor and Anne Hathaway do a really good job in this movie. Like, I don't think it's a secret. Anne Hathaway's Oscar winner. Chiwetel Ejiofor should be an Oscar winner.
Yeah.
You know, they're really good with the material they're given, even though sometimes it does feel like I'm like, especially with Anne Hathaway, sometimes it feels like I'm acting right now and like this is what I'm doing. And it doesn't help that she like has a smoking problem in it, because that's like the most cliched acting thing I think you could put out there. But with my complaint about this film, I feel like they could have dreamed a little bigger with some of this stuff. And like,
Totally.
Again, you're thinking like it's COVID and stuff, and I understand it, but like, then like all of a sudden you get to this last half and there's like a lot of extras in the background and stuff. And you're like, wait a second. You
They're
could have
moving
like
through
really,
that whole tunnel with no one with a mask on or anything.
yeah, and I'm like, where are all the masks and the social distancing, first of all? But that kind of got me to be like, and that scene you were talking about with it, where it's like, oh, like we're putting all this food in, and this is like obviously like a big part of this Harrods like area, and like if you lived in London you'd get it. And it's like, not that I live in London, but like it's like, why couldn't you like do more exterior shots in London when it's empty? Like I keep like hitting myself in the head being like, why didn't I think of this? Like I should have gone to San Francisco when it was empty and just filmed there for a day for fun, because like no one's out there. But again, it's like, it's thinking about like earlier in the pandemic where like no one went out really for anything besides groceries. But I kind of wish this film just dared to do that. It's like, this film should have been like, don't you wish you did this during COVID? Like, don't you wish you like went out and like saw fucking like these huge landmarks and no one else was there?
Yeah, it should have been wish fulfillment.
Exactly. But in a way, like maybe they couldn't have dreamed that big back then, because it's like they literally logistically couldn't put that together. But at the end, again, you're seeing all these people and I'm like, oh, they probably could have done it.
That's one of my big problems with the movie, is like the mask usage made me angry, not because obviously it's realistic, because it's the first couple of weeks, or I think the first month at least, of the pandemic. So everyone's kind of, I mean, I remember early on, like the first couple days before there was an actual full lockdown, like I went to the store without a mask because like I didn't have a mask. So like that was just a thing. But so like that's fine within the context of the movie, but it made me angry because it means that wait, they have all these actors get tested. Like nobody is in danger of actually getting COVID on this set, because they're like, definitely Chiwetel Ejiofor and Anne Hathaway were quarantining together during the duration of this, production. They weren't going out to bars and stuff. So yeah, it made me think, just like, why couldn't we have started this movie pre-quarantine? Like why couldn't there be a scene where they're out to dinner and Anne Hathaway just starts crying because like they know that they need to break up, and then we cut 1 month later and they're in the pandemic and they're stuck together. Like why couldn't we do more things like that? Why couldn't we have them go out to more places? It definitely felt like the camera itself was stuck inside.
Yeah.
It wasn't imaginative enough for me.
Yeah.
You make a interesting point with starting it before the lockdown, because I feel like in a lot of ways the lockdown kind of had nothing to do with this movie. It kind of felt like something that was just like thrown in there. Like I think it could have completely been done without it. I actually thought the most enjoyable part of the movie was towards the end with the high stuff, and then the other 90 minutes of the movie were rather bland and just seemed like extra. So I feel like the lockdown was more of a novelty than anything that was actually useful to the film. Kind
of like going off that, but like with the heist at the very end, it like felt so anticlimactic in a way. I was like, it's only that big and that's it. Again, it's just like it should have just like dreamed a little bigger, but it's easier said than done. And I think we've been saying this the whole time. We definitely should give credit to them for attempting to making a movie during quarantine, and like even making one and like doing it in a safe way. Like, again, I was like reporting on this film a lot, and like there were no COVID cases that I know of, which is like
That's
pretty
good.
pretty remarkable for a movie that was shot in, I want to say like September, October time, to just do something pretty safe like that.
Yeah, again, none of the criticisms that I have here are like emotional rants of a hacky YouTuber. Like, it's all just stuff that I think could be remedied. And so I feel like it's justifiable to levy these criticisms, because the movie just doesn't hold enough. Jack, to your point about how fun the heist stuff was, that is by far the best part of the movie. The rest of the movie is pretty tough, because I find the characters to be a little bit unlikable. Again, because the movie is at odds with itself, it seems like it was supposed to be a comedy, but you have these two incredibly talented dramatic actors sort of doing a dramatic take on a comedy idea. And so a lot of it came across as sort of like whiny, a little bit. Some of it was just a little bit underwritten, in my opinion. Some of it was just a bit underdeveloped. So most of the movie is that. And then once you get to the actual heist, the heist itself, like, there's not that many moments where they have to think quickly on their feet. You know, the stuff that makes like the Ocean's 11, 12, 13 movies really fun.
There's no lasers.
There's no lasers like in, yeah. But at least it's like humming for a minute. Like, they're doing something. They're out and about. The filmmaking finally, because that's another criticism, is that the cinematography and the filmmaking and the shot composition and the style is kind of just not there. Like, it's really a style-less movie. And once you get into the actual heist, it's like, okay, here we go. Steven Soderbergh time. Like, this is the movie that we should have gotten. This should have been an iPhone Steven Soderbergh movie.
It could have been a 30-minute short film, I think, and I think it could have been a lot of fun.
100%. 100%.
Yeah, it is interesting, because also there's some like fun moments that just are like fun, huge character moments that are just like gone because like they couldn't afford to do it, or they couldn't do it in general. Like you were saying, the camera felt like it was stuck inside. Like Chiwetel Ejiofor comes back and he's like, I just rode my motorcycle and it was the coolest thing ever, you know? And like, it's just like, he like learned so much about like himself on that trip, and like he was like chased by police or something. He's like going off on this story, and like we don't see it. Nope. It's just like is he lying, you know?
Yeah, it sounds like that's the coolest part of the story, and we didn't get to see it.
Yeah. Also, I don't know if they did have the motorcycle at the end, because Anne Hathaway rides it at one point, right?
Very Selena Kyle for a minute.
Very Selena, yeah, definitely. It's crazy how that was like almost 10 years ago now that she played Catwoman. But yeah, again, there's just some chunks missing, but like overall, again, it's fine.
It's a 5 out of 10.
Perfect 5 out of 10.
Perfect 5 out of 10. If that's what they were going for, then they hit it right on the nose.
Yeah, I'll just run down like the rest of my problems just really
go
quickly,
for it, baby.
And then I'll jump into, if you guys have more problems, you could jump in. But then if not, I'll jump into some of the things that I think could have helped the movie a little bit. I already mentioned I found the characters to be kind of unlikable. I think it's because of the tonal inconsistency, the fact that the movie's at odds with itself. Is it a comedy? Is it a drama? I already mentioned the side characters kind of feel like distractions as opposed to characters. It just feels like we have to get out of this house because we're running out of ideas. We don't get the idea of the heist until like an hour into the movie. And I was thinking, oh, there's only a half an hour left, right? And then I checked the time and I'm like, no, there's 57 minutes left. Oh my God, this is the halfway point in the movie? Yikes. So that was tough. I already mentioned it was kind of poorly marketed. It's not really a comedy heist. It's kind of just like a sour drama is how I would describe it. The characters feel very sour to me. The opium scene was really weird.
So weird. What?
Oh, yeah.
So weird.
That was bizarre. He's like, I've been sober for 10 years, but apparently we have opium growing in our yard. And these.
It felt like it was an excuse to like introduce the hedgehog or something, to like give the hedgehog meaning. And I'm like, what?
Yeah, it was like, I don't really know what it does for you. If that scene happens, if you meet those two people, those like two drug addicts early in the movie, and they're like, yeah, we've been coming into your yard to like steal opium. And then he's like, what? That's weird, but I'm not going to do it. but then he does it the night before the heist, and the morning of the heist, he's like super sick, then there's something there.
There
But-
you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, but instead it's like a weird one-off scene, and like it doesn't really affect very much of the movie. He doesn't like botch Anne Hathaway's job interview by throwing up on the Zoom call, you know? Nothing happens, you know?
Which would have been kind of funny. But also, I think, like, obviously that's representative of him, like, wanting to go back to, like, when he was, like, cool and awesome and rode a motorcycle. But I think that the motorcycle also is just representative of that. Like, you don't need a hat on a hat, as they say.
That's another problem, is the motorcycle metaphor didn't fully pay off. I thought doing a little bit more with it ultimately was just a plot device for the side characters to have something to do, for like his half brother, that character. That's another thing, is there's not a big enough payoff for all of the side characters, and for the people who got laid off, and for the half brother,
and for the people who got laid.
yeah.
Just some weird storylines.
Such a weird.
the one guy out of the layoff scene shows up at the store, and like his motivation was kind of weak. That wasn't a great payoff. That was like your big like whoa moment in the heist, and if that's your big whoa moment in the heist, it's not a great heist.
Yeah, and I love Mark Gatiss, so it was like really disappointing when he just came in and then was like, all right, bye.
He was really fun. Yeah, I'm happy to see him in the movie. I really liked the actors that they found and chose for the side characters.
Yeah.
How they get in and out of the heist is too easy. She's just able to talk to the lady. She hands the lady the Chiwetel Ejiofor's Edgar Allan Poe thing, and then just is like, oh, by the way, did you know I found someone? And then she just doesn't check it. It's like, that's a little bit too easy of a way to get into the building, and then the way that they get out was a little bit too easy.
Yeah, they just walked right out.
They literally do. They just walk right
And like
out.
not to harp on the Edgar Allan Poe bit, but like even that could have been like a big point for that. Like she looks at it and goes, Edgar Allan Poe. And like this is a character we've kind of established like that Anne Hathaway's friends with and is like somewhat intelligent. And if she went like, that's an interesting name, and then like gave it back, you know, like it was like, oh, truly no one knows who Edgar Allan Poe is anymore.
And then as they walk away, Chiwetel is just kind of like, are you kidding me? Because like he's a poet. That should be the thing that he cares about the most. It's like, this is a joke. Like, how do people not know who this guy is? And then Anne Hathaway can remind him, like, what are you focused on right now? Like, you just got in. Tyler, you can attest to this, but I've been saying Chiwetel Ejiofor should be the lead of way more movies for quite some time, because I really love Chiwetel Ejiofor. And I really love Anne Hathaway. I think she gets a weird amount of like hate. A lot of people don't like her. I think it's just because like she's kind of like a classical theater kid. Like there's like a do it all quality. She could sing, dance, act, and she has some very showy performances. And I think a lot of people just came to dislike her. But I've always loved her. I think that this movie works better with comedic actors. I was trying to think back in like history. I kept thinking of like, if this movie was made more like When Harry Met Sally, if this was like a young Billy Crystal or like a Robin Williams when he was 35.
Yeah, if you get the cast of, I forgot that remake that Will Ferrell did last year, but it was Will Ferrell and Julia Louis-Dreyfus. And it's like, if you get them in this, like, it's a lot of fun because like, again, they're comedic and like envisioning them doing a heist is like, whoa. Like they're doing a heist, that's actually kind of inherently funny. But with Chiwetel Ejiofor and Anne Hathaway, it's like, oh, they've done action movies. Like they are badasses just in general. So it does take that away from it. But again, you go back and you look at like what Stephen Knight has written in the past, and like it's nothing like how funny this movie could be. And I think inherently because we're funny people and like comedians and we write sketch, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Like, because that, like, we look at those little things that he does and we're like, oh, if you just like push that a little further, like it could be really good. But again, this is the writer of Peaky Blinders and Locke, which is a movie about Tom Hardy driving.
Right.
And like, you know, he really does do all these like intimate character studies. And like, I think this just tries to toe the line between like an intimate character study and like acknowledging how weird COVID stuff is. Like, again, there's so much reference, and I don't think it's horrible, and I was expecting a lot more, but there's a lot of reference to like everything everyone talked about in March, April, and May. Like, it's like he sees a guy with a bunch of toilet paper and he's like, "You got two asses there, huh? Like, why you got so much toilet paper?" And then it's like, wait, why was that scene even in the movie? Like, that was just a toilet paper joke. But again, like, you know, it's just some weird stuff like that. But like, also when you go back, it's like trying to be like a deep character study on like this relationship that didn't work before COVID, and now that they're stuck together, it's like even worse. And again, just like finding a fine way to toe that line, because like I think two people that hate each other and then come back together is possible to make funny and good, but like it just has to be like they're mad at stupid stuff that they do and not mad like about like, oh, like
you drive a van.
Yeah, you drive a van. I'm a CEO. I like went to a guy's 60th birthday party and didn't tell you about it. Like, I slept with your half brother's like girlfriend and like all this stuff, you know, that is like a lot just more dramatic than it needs to be. But again, that's like the writer. So like, I guess in general, I think it could definitely be a comedic film, but like also if you just like bring down some of the jokes, I think it could definitely just be like a serious character drama too. But again, it's trying to toe the line, and like just picking one route is probably the easiest.
It could have been like Game Night with Jason Bateman.
Great.
It could have been great movie, great comedy. Has no business being as good as it is.
We'll talk about it one day.
Yeah, but
Jesse Plemons is great in that movie for all you Fargo heads.
But there you go. You hit the Fargo reference.
I'm gonna hit Fargo again. I'm gonna hit it again in my notes. Yes! Don't worry. But it could have gone the Game Night route, where it's like it's this like very silly comedic premise with sort of an everyman lead, like a Jason Bateman. And I think Chiwetel could have played that. I think Anne Hathaway could have played that. Anne Hathaway her character in like Ocean's 8 is the character I kind of wanted more during this. Like, she's very silly and very crazy in that movie. But I think it's closer to a funny Steven Soderbergh movie. And that's why the entire time I was like, God, if Soderbergh had this, if he had an iPhone on this one right now, like, my God, this would be so good. But
yeah, because he's only shooting on iPhones now.
Yeah, pretty much. But no, I think it could have been like a Soderbergh dramedy, like a drama that has or a comedy that has a heart of gold, a drama that has really serious moments. Can
I put a comp to that I just thought about?
Absolutely.
It could have been like Logan Lucky.
Yes.
Which I think is again, no business being as good as it is. But it is a great little movie that came out in 2017. And it's a fun heist movie, and they focus on the heist for most of it. That's the thing that makes it a lot of fun.
Yeah, and here's the stuff that I think could have made this movie better. I think the core elements of who these characters are, they got really right. They just didn't pull the thread tight enough. Chiwetel is a former incarcerated individual who is a good person and has the heart of a poet. Things just aren't working for him, and he just needs a break. Like, he gets really sad, actually, in that moment where Anne Hathaway tells him, "You can't rob the store because I'm going to be doing the store stuff." And he's like, "I can't catch a break." And it was actually very, very sweet. That idea is good. So he has motivation to want to screw these assholes at the top of the game who are still benefiting during COVID. Anne Hathaway also hates her company, and she's like at the top of the game, but she hates them. So she's like, "You guys, you have no soul. I want to hurt you also." Those two characters inside of the film should work really well as your characters for this heist, because it should have been about it. I mean, this is my personal bias, but I think this movie should have been about class. It should have been about like, we are these two, they're sort of two different class levels, but they have the same goal. And that's to be like, these assholes are still benefiting during COVID while all of these lower class people, all of these regular people are really hurting. So we're going to take this goddamn diamond and we're going to hurt them. That's what I think that the movie should have honed in on more. And I think that the way that you pay off the side characters is like his half brother is like having trouble with money. He mentions that a couple of times. The community, when he goes out and reads poetry, there's an old lady across the street. She's going to goddamn die because this pandemic goes on for 10 months. So
And she's old.
So all of these different characters and like the people that got laid off, they commit this heist in the attempt, because that's what good writing is. They have a goal. They don't accomplish that goal, but in the process, they learn something about themselves or each other, and they get what they actually wanted the whole time. So they get the money. They realize that they're in love with each other still, and they don't need the money. They give it back to the people. Steal from the rich, give to the poor. The story's right there. It's right there. It's all there for you. But they just don't wrestle with those big themes as much as I would want them to.
Yeah, totally agreed. And they also like kind of mesh it weirdly sometimes with when you were talking about how Chiwetel Ejiofor always talked about his fate and stuff in this film, like it reminded me of that his like nemesis in it, like just that like one like slimy British guy who's all like, "Oh, you're back here, aren't you?" Like he's like really. He's just really over the top, and he has something against Chiwetel Ejiofor. And
that's
he's just
that's my second Fargo mention. Is I guarantee he auditioned for VM Varga in season 3 of Fargo.
Yeah, just this insane guy who's like, "I have the same job as you, but I hate you, and you shouldn't be back
You
here."
low class scum.
But yeah, surprisingly, we talked about this film for longer than I thought we would. And just to open this last section up, let's kind of talk about the state of Hollywood following the release of this movie and how in the next year or 2 years or 60 years, we're going to see a new genre kind of emerge, and it's going to be the pandemic genre. Because while there were pandemic or epidemic films beforehand, this is the first that was shot completely during one, and it is something like in the industry, it's important to have films that connect with people, and everyone can connect, unfortunately, with a pandemic film now. And there are going to be a lot of them. There's a Michael Bay one coming out that looks very offensive. Just in general, like, what do we want out of pandemic films, if anything? And like, why do you think Hollywood is obsessed with this? And it's sad that it's going to become a new trend. Like the pandemic's not even over, and we have a bunch that are just about done, and we have one released, which is locked down. So how are you guys feeling about that?
I will tell you what I want from pandemic films, and that's absolutely nothing. I don't want anything to do with these pandemic films. I do not want to be reminded of this pandemic ever. I would like it to go away. I'm not a fan of them.
Yeah, let me read you a quote from my memory that I said during my last month or so at school. I was in a film.
My memory. Hold on.
I was in a film class, and we were all gonna shoot a project on campus. It was gonna be our last project of the year. We had already written our scripts. We shot one of them, one student's, on a Monday, and then Tuesday we got shut down. So we had to sort of switch gears and then shoot a film from home. And so because the pandemic was fresh on everyone's mind, everyone was doing something sort of pandemic related, which makes sense because you want to reflect your reality in your art. And that makes sense. It's the thing that I said in our Zoom meeting with the class was, this is probably going to be one of the most significant moments in our generation's life. I don't know if we can do enough films, enough art about the pandemic, because it is going to be such a significant part of our lives. And it would be weird if we didn't make films about World War II. You know, like that would just be strange if we didn't talk about the Nazis in our films. But I'm now sort of leaning more towards where you're at, Jack, which is like, I'm so sick of this. And I think we talked about this on the Best of 2020 series when we were talking about music. I mentioned that musicians can uniquely reflect the times in a quicker fashion than films. And that's where I want to go for the feelings of pandemic and quarantine and COVID. With COVID, movies can't get their stuff out fast enough to actually reflect the times. So it's sort of, when I'm watching Lockdown, I'm just thinking, it feels kind of outdated. It feels like it's out of place. It's just like what's the takeaway here? Like, people are bad on Zoom calls. We know that. Like comedians have been doing bits about that for 10 months now. So I just feel like movies aren't the right thing to do to get to the heart of what this pandemic means right now, at least. In 20 years, if somebody has a really incredible conceit for the pandemic era sort of movie, if Greta Gerwig in 20 years wants to make a movie about a coming of age story of a young girl who has health issues during the pandemic, something like that, then that's fine. But right now, it's not the medium for this story, I don't think. The news and music and like weekly YouTube content even is better suited to handle this material.
Yeah, I 100% agree with what you said about like in 20 years or something. I'm more open to it. In my comedy school classes, and this doesn't apply just to comedy, I think, but one of the things we talk about is how you need distance from a subject in order to make jokes about it, or in this case, just sometimes any media in this case. And I feel like right now, there's not enough distance between pandemic and COVID for me to want to see projects about it right now, because we're still going through it. And unless it's like some sort of, like, I would watch a documentary about it right now, but I don't want to see a fictional story about it. Ask me again in 10, 15, 20 years, maybe, but right now, nah, I'm good.
Yeah, and kind of going off that, I think 20 years down the road, you really find out like what was important in the story. And I'm just gonna take a shot in the dark here, but I don't think toilet paper going out of stock is gonna be like a huge thing. It's gonna be more about like, why did people do that? Why did people hoard things? And it's because they were scared. And like, obviously you can think that now, but like there are still so many people scared around the world that like it's just too soon, I think. And again, like the thing is, this was written like probably March to July or something. And like it is very much of the time. And like it needs to, I think this movie, like no movie needs to get made really, unless it's like super important. This movie didn't need to get made, but like if you have the script, you give it to Doug Liman, it's like, well, we should film this as soon as possible because like it's gonna go out of style with all the jokes and stuff. So I guess in a way I'm happy that they got this together. It's a unique experience, I'm sure, for all of them. But it just didn't mesh 100% well. And I just worry that these rushed pandemic films are all going to feel like that. And then some are just going to be very like disrespectful to the thousands and millions of people that have gotten COVID, and a lot have died from it too. So I'm not looking forward to all of the pandemic films. But as it comes, lockdown isn't the worst, but it certainly isn't good.
All criticisms levied against the movie are just purely about the text itself. No shame or discredit to the actors, the performers, the crew that all... I mean, they made the best use of their time during COVID. They made a movie. That's great.
Yeah.
Not a movie that is great, but a movie, period. That's great. So, kudos to them. I think that there were several misfires, but God, I would have given to be on that set. That would have been fun,
So yeah, I guess we're good. Like, I don't know what else to say about it. What's our next review, guys?
We don't know yet.
We're putting out the NFL pod. So stay tuned for that. I'm sure that no one that's listening to this will listen to that, but that's coming out before the Super Bowl. And then after that, we got a whole slew of things coming down the pipe. We're doing What We Do in the Shadows. We're doing more movies like this. I think we're going to talk about The Little Things, the Denzel Washington, Rami Malek movie, if that's good, or if it's terrible, or if it's mediocre, because we just spent an hour talking about a mediocre movie, so we could do it again. And then more Fargo reviews, all sorts of stuff coming. We're going to be pumping out a lot of stuff, weekly content coming your way, and all of it, I think, is going to be better than the stuff that we've done before, because I think we're getting better. I think we're getting better as we go along, And so thank you for joining us on this journey. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think we said we may do some stuff around award season and whatnot. Yeah, keep your ears open. We'll be coming in them.
Oh, no. This has been another Nothing Notable podcast. See you guys around.